So our next speaker is Bernard McGuirk, who's Emeritus Professor of Spanish, Portuguese and Latin American Studies at the University of Nottingham, where it's originally appointed, I think, as a lecturer in French. So a real Romance Studies journal contributor in that respect. He has been the head of the Department of Spanish, Portuguese, Latin American Studies, and also the head of the Postgraduate School of Critical Theory at Nottingham University before it became a department. He is at the moment Director of the Centre for the Study of Post-Conflict Cultures, which I think has morphed into the International Consortium for the Study of Post-Conflict Reconstruction and Reconciliation. So his research has spread and expanded across the Romance languages, but particularly Portuguese, Latin American Studies, and critical theory. And some of his works, recent work has been, well, most of his recent work has been on the Falkland-Malvinas conflict in Argentina. His seminal book on that subject, Falkland-Malvinas, An Unfinished Business, was published by Routledge in 2007. And I believe he is preparing at the moment a book entitled, and this is such a Bernard title, It Breaks Two to Tangle, Political Cartoons and the Falkland-Malvinas War. But he's published very widely, for example, Redirections in Critical Theory, that came out in 1994, Latin American Literature, Symptoms, Risks and Strategies of Post-Structuralist Criticism, 2013, and in your youth, in 1988, Fernando Pessoa, Three Persons on One, and Bernard is going to talk about Fernando Pessoa right now. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. And there will be blood. Not. When I came in and saw the forbidden volume, which you're not allowed to touch or take away, I saw the names and they were an invitation down memory lane. So before I begin, I just wanted to say that looking back, I want to open up a retrospective briefly on how we were and how we are. In the 70s and 80s, departments were the Department of French, the Department of Spanish, the Department of Italian. There was usually one professor, a period specialist, for example, medieval or Renaissance, modern, etc. And then there were some area specialists, for example, Latin American Studies, Portuguese, or linguistics, or so. Then the pioneers came, and as I look around the room, I hate to name you, but I'm going to do, because in my recollection, several of the pioneers are here. Our dear, dear friend and inspiration, Malcolm Bowie, is still here with us, in my view. A man we love. I see Joel Banyu's here, of course, and welcome back, however briefly. You see Naomi Siegel's here, and Jill Ryan, and Judith, my friend and colleague in Nottingham. And I call them pioneers amongst the many others that actually expanded those departments from the single name departments and the single, often rather narrow but impressive scholarship that took place, and allowed an opening up, much to the chagrin of many of the previous generations, but I think much to the joy of the many students who passed through in those exciting years. So I want to speak today about just a sonnet, and I want to do so in terms of showing, I hope, how literary analysis and cultural studies and theoretical approaches can come together And originally I called this, when asked by Catherine if I'd speak, a meditation. I thought that that was, even by my standards, fairly bland, so I thought that I'd do this. I'm going to read a poem, and I'm going to subject that poem to erasure and erasures. I'm going to read the poem to you first of all. Can you see the whole poem behind me in Portuguese? Soneto. Meu coração é um almirante louco que abandonou a profissão do mar e que vai relembrando pouco a pouco em casa, a passear. Num movimento, eu mesmo me desloco nesta cadeira, solda o imaginar. O mar abandonado fica em foco nos músculos cansados de parar. Há saudades nas pernas e nos braços. Há saudades no cérebro por fora. Há grandes raivas feitas de cansaços. Mas esta é boa. Era do coração que eu falava. E onde diabo estou eu agora, como almirante, em vez de sensação? And just loosely translated. A sonnet. My heart is a mad admiral who has left the profession of the sea and who keeps remembering little by little at home, walking up and down, up and down. In the movement, I myself shift in this chair, just imagining it. The sea left behind remains in focus, in muscles tired of having rested. There is longing in the legs and in the arms. There is longing in the brain outside. There are great furies made of tirednesses. But that's a good one. It was of the heart that I was speaking. And where the devil am I now? With an admiral instead of feeling. Il n'y a pas de hors texte, we are told. But what is inside? What is outside the poem under erasure, under erasures, when there is no difference between inside and outside? Just a little difference. So let us see and let us hear. Under erasures, under identity, self, referentiality, tradition, ideologies, and erasures, biography, life and work, influence, coherence, voice, univocality, heteronomy, undecidability. I think you might hear and see there some of the preoccupations of all of us in our various periods and our guises and our phases and our obsessions. So, to text. Okay.
Ben, can you make it a little bit bigger?
That one too. Is that all right? Probably not. Okay. A syllable. A text. A minimal text. The text in which I shall be. In context. A context that is at the same time text. For, as Derrida has reminded us so long ago, we must begin wherever we are. It is impossible to justify absolutely a point of departure. Wherever we are, in a text where we think we are. I am, wherever I write, whenever I speak, in a critical text. I think, yet I shall be accompanied. I shall be in the company of specialists, themselves no less than I, in and of contexts that too must be thought as texts, whence readable. In every national culture, the status of a so-called national literature is indisputably central to the critical discourses generated, and vice versa. The critic approaching the reciprocal and mutually feeding phenomena needs to be aware and be wary of neglecting the power of such appropriations, and the root of the word proper is enough to remind the oft-deemed intruder that he or she be respectful whenever within the property of the host. Yet host and ghost are no less close, and the haunting of the house might scare, or at least intimidate, the however eager or informed guest. In my return today to Lusophone studies, the primary but not exclusive locus of Fernando Pessoa studies, I've been intrigued to hear the discourses of guests present and to feel the hauntings of voices past. For just as the House of the Lord has many mansions, so the loci of literary criticism undergo the constructions and reconstructions of modes, fashions, coteries, overlords, dynasties, and industries, including the nationalized. I could have shown you, had a Portuguese citizen been here with his or her passport, that in the passport there is a representation of Fernando Pessoa. But I prefer engineering bricolage, not navigations à la portugaise, but navigations. Ils ont changé ma chanson. N times have the revenant spectrology multiplied my Lusophone visitations. Each time the N of indeterminacy has borne me to, through and beyond the capital N of nation. Poetry too will have had to pass through the gauze of a history capital H that has shrouded the capital investment of a national institution come image and voice of author, authority. It is to be apprehended in a writerly rather than a readerly mode, not subserviently but openly, à la Roland Barthes, taking for granted that the birth of the reader, though never the dictum, must be at the cost of the death and the dictat of the author. A Pessoa poem, riskily, from a syllable, a syllabus, comfortably for les anciens, will render impossible any utterance, any gesture assumed to justify absolutely a point of departure. Will prompt again but alertness to the structuration and the structurality of structure. Resistant to yet performing, we must begin wherever we are, in a text where we think we are, with an so Portuguese reminiscence of the sea as text. Naveg, na, sorriso. Or with such scandalous tissues of quotations, that again, woven by writerly interference for this era of the other, l'oreille de l'autre, an ever iterated, wistful, personal, melancholic, or shall I sing again, no melancholic intertext, a tessera of completion and antithesis. What have they done to my song? Ils ont changé ma chanson mar. Thus, rechanger, mar will swell, will break, will engulf in a classic transition. A possessive ma will drown out any subjective voice, munia, or sub-eventual me, a, mine, I, mine. Identity markers for self, writer, speaker, personal, national. It is there to be regret for the inevitable loss through, in, text, chanson, of any linear causal ownership or voiced responsibility. And what of ils? Who are they? The changers of that chanson. presented lexically as mine, but which, malgré the interferers, appropriators, readers, critics, will retain its structurality, or, as Paul Zumthor would have it, that peculiar circularity of song ever open to, whilst momentarily enclosing the textual fluidity of mouvance. By way of prolepsis to the sonnet song that is prompted by the keynote release of breath and unvoiced sound, comes a cautious insistence on the insights into the dynamics of the medieval lyric offered by Zumthor, and applicable no less in modernity, albeit unheeded, perchance unknown by many a Pessoan exegete, to the poet's performance of the, Zumthor again, mobilité essentielle du texte. And I quote, Zumthor: "The space is occupied by the circumstances attached to the song, by the anecdotic link of an apparent causality, of a fictive accompaniment, of an anteriority or posteriority which are interchangeable. The song elevates a fragment of duration into an absolute value. The chanson is thus its own subject, a subject without a predicate. Although a concept can be the totality of the signified of the subject, it never forms the whole signifier of a predicate. Song, which ends only by coming to its own beginning, is its own totality. That is, in this context, its own meaning." End of the Zumthor quotation. Fernando Pessoa's textual assemblage can always be read as mobile and instrumental. For across the panoply of his infamous heteronyms, he is able both to enter and to keep a distance from a multiplicity of aesthetics, a plurality of postures, a heteroglossia of poetic experimentations, caveat emptor academicus, overweening attention to some putative anecdotic link, to an apparent causality, to any body, to any corpus, might reincorporate Pessoa qua person into habitus readings of personae. I shall refer, in this instance, to but a short text assigned to one of the heteronyms, Álvaro de Campos, o engenheiro, the engineer, in order to illustrate how by machination, be it mechanical or affective, the exaltation of metaphor, or that metonymy that dares too readily speak its name, pro patria, admiral, ever betrays a strong sense of personal loss, of failure, of voicelessness behind the mask, even of the would-be unhinged, latterly naval gazer, but currently unemployed extra homo diegetic board constructor. Sonetti, its own subject, a subject without a predicate, at once elevates a fragment of duration into an absolute value, as simultaneously it stages in exemplary manner tensions detected by the Mexican critic Octavio Paz. In modern times, this great emptiness of the Western world has been expressed, but poets have tried to fill something. I mean, desperation, negation. Emptiness is but one part of the picture. The other is creation. End of quote. The poem both performs and requires incompletion, or in Zumthor's terms, ends only by becoming and coming to its own beginning. For distancing and self-distancing, however controlled, however heteronymized, however dislocated through the ironic displacements of style, will barely conceal a self that is constructed psychically and socially, yes, but as the totality of the signified of the subject, above all as a concept, textually. Familiarity with the history, politics and literary consciousness of Portugal will at once prompt recognition of this sonnet of familiar tensions. Contact with the other entails both exaltation and loss of self. Here, additionally, there emerges a national context of saudosismo. You know that word, saudade, nostalgia, unhappiness, longing, all false translations, but never mind. Saudosismo, of nostalgic maritime yearning, of a longing to be both en casa, at home, and além, over there, beyond. Both here and there, rooted and uprooted, familiar and defamiliarized, in sadness and madness, in the past and in the future. Avul Campus, the engineer's version of the toing and froing in question, here conveyed by a passear, focuses in this instance on a very Portuguese past and on an admiral torn between saudade and raiva, anger, fury. The bracketing of subjectivity and the distancing of me desloco, from an illusory him, louco, cannot conceal a tension between coração and sensação, between emotion and sensation. Both remain distant, however, from any socio-historical correlative. Even the simple chair, the ostensible locus of enunciation of an irredeemably Lusitanian dreamer, awaiting the intervention of agency, the discomfort of a quondam dislocated and dislocating subjectivity, albeit via the mere recall of distant, unsettling furies, or doldrum lulls. Correlatives will ever be but subjectively objective, for, as Adorno has instructed us to think, and I quote, objects do not go into their concepts without leaving the remainder, unquote. Excess, the remainder, excess, poetics, or perhaps psychology, if, as Borges has reminded us, and I quote, the ego is merely an onlooker who has identified himself with the man he is continually looking at. Unquote. Excess, excess-isms. The critic who resists the structurality of the structure of the poem is habitually he, who seeks to consolidate some power, institutional, for example, by proclaiming consistency, coherence, even suprastructural continuity with and without even a pace to the song of Roland, they. When the author has been found, the text is explained, victory to the critic, but ostentatiously tattooed on his or her text. Alternatively, and with support from theorists sadly neglected or forgotten, there will be readings that respect and restitute the syntam, Todorov, or a coextensiveness with the text, permitting the poem to perform in accord with its own capacity, or lack thereof, to resist that paraphrasability that ordinarily ends in isms, ismush, abominable categories of continuity, and consequently movements much cherished by readerly historians of literature. Discontinuity, signalled prior to or already deemed to be part of the art of reading, as well as the writing of soneto, with the three dots, à suivre. The title pauses before and introduces discontinuity as requisite, forces reflection on, undermines, mocks the very emblem of traditional poetic form, the very word sonnet. Performs, ironizes the straight jacket of form whilst inhabiting it. The relation between the title soneto and the 14-line structure that follows, and in which it is embedded, is emblematic of Derrida's insistence il n'y a pas hors texte. The staging begins there in the space of the hyphen, or here of the three dots, also, and ends. ... What of ends? Beware the eyes of the march of frustrated teleology, here configured in the no longer military, in the only X, the superannuated, the retired, the domesticated, en casa, casa portuguesa, a passear, pacing to and fro, confused, disorientated. Onde diabo estou eu agora? Where the devil am I now? With a uniformed past in place of some present sensation. Jacques, it is impossible to justify absolutely a point of departure. Wherever he is, in a text where he thinks he is, the I that speaks is deprived of primacy as it is enveloped by script. Here betrayed by the imperfect, the ever unfinished, the tense that writes, eu falava, I was speaking. Concomitantly, prior and assertive is will have subsided into immediate but uncertain estou, I am, here and now. A metaphysics of essential presence will have been supplemented by, slipped into a devilishly perplexing undecidability. On the diable, where the devil? The trope of using critically the written versus spoken problematic of often neglected Derrida versus Austin and Searle debates may serve to situate Pessoa's text amidst the tensions of arch-écriture performed against the presence of parole and therefore counter to any accessibility of or to a self prior to a text. Il n'y a pas de or eu. For eu can only ever and always become qua text. Not only the mot juste, but also the juste, le mot, albeit ever in an exact spatial context. For recall Zumthor again, the space, I quote, is occupied by the circumstances attached to the song, by the anecdotic link of an apparent causality, of a fictive accompaniment, of an anteriority or posteriority, which are interchangeable. An admiral on the bridge of size. Catachresis. Or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing, end them, to die, to sleep. Uncannily, there needs no ghost come from the grave to tell us this, for our fellow guest, Monsieur Zumthor, a little more than kin, is with us still. For this relief, much thanks. Or he again, will discourse most eloquent music. Zumthor. If one wanted to define the use of chanson, it would be more appropriate to speak of catachresis than of metaphor. The song ceases, but it has no end. That is why there are always other songs. Instead of starting from the author and the producer of the artistic communication or the text, the communication itself, from the beginning there should be an analysis of the reader, the receiver. The poem flows to its end, and if it loses itself at some end point, that terminus is itself. Is the heart to be seen here as the seat and source of the emotions? Antithetically, in opposition to the heart, there is the body. Opacity and inertia are opposed to the outpouring of radiance. End of Zumthor. Alas, poor Almirante. I knew him. And his patria. Mas esta é boa. Is the heart, coração, to be seen here as the seat, cadeira, and the source of emotions? Or, antithetically, is sensação, sensation, the better textualized via catachresis, where, respectively, metonym and metaphor failed nationally, historically, generation after generation. Fallacious representation, flawed rhetoric, or even the use of the wrong word for a context, characterize a forced and especially paradoxical figure of speech, a misuse, an abuse, catachresis, catachrestic arms against a Portuguese sea, or just already and always belated, ever too late, futile lament, a sad song, inertia chanted against imagined troubles, without a vege de instead of that periphrastic yet princely end. In a clinamen, a poetic prison proper, a swerve away from the precursor, and a kenosis, a movement towards discontinuity with the precursor, Harold Bloom, indecisive soliloquizing points to irresolution, ever without termination, received or readable as closure. Instead, the poem flows to its end, and if it loses itself at some end point, that terminus is itself. Pneuma. Ah, the breath, the sigh. Pneuma anticipates and replicates the thematics of cansasus, wearinesses, thanatos, but also breathe life. Ah, eros, into the enthronement of imminent death within the topos, but not the performance of an exhausted literal reform. À resuivre, déjà et toujours. Discouraging what Michel Foucault has termed the consoling play of recognitions, the poetry, like all knowledge, is not made for understanding, it's made for cutting. The meta-historical reading of literary eras or modes may be viewed as ever reflexive. An early institutionalized, usually academic decision regarding the drawing of boundaries will rebound. Compartments will come apart. Isms will be schisms. All ismush will exist as a category only for the categorically determined, and for those collectively schooled, thence solitary in the cadeia, carceleda, in the career, in the chair, in the chains of imprisonment. Ah, thanks.